So when I'm not drinking beer or eating crisps out of a cup in my underpants, I do like to ponder some of life's greatest and deepest questions. Questions like, how big is the universe? How many universes are there? What happens when we die? And if these questions aren't enough, I often get asked even harder questions from flat earthers and young earth creationists. Questions such as, how does kangaroos exist in Australia? Or, if vacuum is not a pressure, why do astronauts need spacesuits? And it's highly specialised thinking like this that led to the events resulting in today's story. And the question we're going to be answering today is, what would a school board full of young earth creationists instruct their schools to do? Who would take them to court for it? And how badly would they get humiliated in the aftermath? So while this flat earther here is preparing his advanced aeronautics lecture, I think it's time for me to hop in the time machine and show you where it all began. Let's go. I'll spray your face with poo. It's 1982. Sorry, I'm just practicing my bingo. Just be thankful it wasn't 1969. Last time I called that out at a public event, I nearly got arrested. Yeah, it turns out apparently people aren't used to seeing bingo in a church. Especially at a funeral. So in 1982, Dean Kenyon and Percival Davis started writing a book titled Creation Biology Textbook Supplements. Now I know what you're thinking, but this really was a real textbook. I had it printed out on toilet roll and I made a lot of use of it. Here's a quick quote. The basic metabolic pathways of nearly all organisms are the same. Is this because of descent from a common ancestor, or because only these pathways and their variations can sustain life? Evolutionists think the former is correct. Creationists, because of all the evidence discussed in this book, conclude the latter is correct. Now we all know the place for a book like this is in the fiction section, but unfortunately for the authors of this book, they wanted it to be a proper science textbook. But it was decided by the Supreme Court in 1987 that teaching creationism in public schools violated something called the Establishment Clause of the United States Constitution. So here's what they did, and I kid you not, they wrote another version of this book and they called it Of Pandas and People. It was basically the same book, but what they did is they took out words like creation, creationist, creationism, and they swapped it with terms like intelligent design. And they hoped nobody would notice. What could go wrong? Now it's probably going to take them a little while to make all those edits, so while they're doing it, let's segue ourselves into a new 60-second segment that I like to call Today's Big Question. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for The Big Question! And the big question today is, if you work in education and you stand by your strong religious beliefs, will that give you an advantage or a disadvantage? Well, it was certainly a disadvantage for a Mr. Headley from London who was sacked from his teaching job after standing by his religious beliefs. And you know what? You've got to feel sorry for the guy at the resulting tribunal here, and he did put up a good case, you know? Why should he be sacked for just being an ordinary Christian with orthodox beliefs? But then it did transpire that his orthodox beliefs told him that homosexuals had the DNA of Satan and Jews and Catholics were evil. And he was also a biblical flat earther who in his design and technology classes was teaching flat earth theory to his kids. Now, if you wonder what he was teaching when he wasn't teaching flat earth, well, I think JC Denton from Hell's Kitchen might have just got that sussed. Somebody else sacked for simply having religious beliefs was a certain Nathaniel Abraham. Now, Mr. Abraham was a young earth creationist who strongly denied the scientific evidence for evolution and claimed that creation was intelligent design by God. Now, if that's his belief, that's his belief. Don't sack him for it. However, in this case, he was a professional biologist working for the famous Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and his research work on zebrafish was highly based on evolutionary theory, so maybe he wasn't the right man for the job after all. So it appears then that not being religious and not supporting religious ideals will give you an advantage in the classroom, doesn't it? Or does it? A certain California history teacher called Mr. Corbett was in charge of the school newspaper, and he got wind that one of the school biology teachers was teaching students creationism after school. Now this certainly seemed like an interesting story, so he put it in the school newspaper and said that this biology teacher, while teaching creationism, was not teaching actual science. But writing that article apparently violated something called the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Now this clause can be interpreted as banning government officials from promoting or displaying hostility towards any particular religion. Now this is a fact that the creationist teacher was aware of, so she used this clause to sue him. Fast forward another 20 years and Mr. Corbett was sued again, this time by a student. And what for? Well, for making a series of comments that basically alluded to the fact that religion was totally disconnected from science. So there we go, it appears that today's big question was quite complex and ended in a draw. Next time we'll tackle a simpler question such as, should all flat earthers be forced to wear shoes with Velcro instead of shoelaces? And how many hours would this save at the bowling alley in the queue that you've got to get into to change your shoes? So the edits have now been made to the book and it's got to be printed and somebody's got to pay for that printing. And in this case, the people paying are the Foundation for Thought and Ethics. We're going to refer to them as the FTE from now on. They're a Christian think tank based in Texas. Now, the founder of the FTE was a guy called John Boole, and he had an idea of creating a quiet army of Christians that would approach biology teachers and schools individually to try and sneak this book into schools under the radar. And the term quiet army isn't something I've just made up. This is him using that term himself in communication with his own supporters. Now, on a completely unrelated note, I am sure, in Pennsylvania just a few years later, the Dover Area School Board received anonymously 60 copies of this textbook. And would you believe the utter coincidence that at this time, it turns out that the majority of the members of the Dover Area School Board were young Earth creationists, so they voted to endorse the book. And I'll tell you what happened next, after this bit of genius. Ladies and gentlemen, proof of reincarnation there. Shakespeare is reborn. Anyway, let's revisit the Dover Area School District. They took their newly gifted book and made it compulsory for biology teachers teaching evolution to read out a certain section from the book which stated that intelligent design was a legitimate alternative to evolution. Now, the parents of the children saw this for exactly what it was, which was to undermine science using religious indoctrination, and a court case began. Now, during the court case, the Dover Area School District were represented by the Thomas More Law Centre, a Christian group of lawyers who'd already promised that should any litigation come as a result of trying to force this book into schools, that they would offer free legal defence. Now, it did obviously transpire that their legal defence would be just about as useless as half a hedgehog trying to drive a bus, but it's all the Dover Area School District had, and the court case went ahead. Oh, one last thing. The FTE had been watching on, and it suddenly dawned on them that if it transpired in court that Of Pandas and People was deemed to be a creationist book and not a science textbook, then it wouldn't be available to buy into schools anymore, and the FTE would lose an awful lot of money. So they decided to file a motion to become a defendant in the case alongside the Dover Area School District to try and save a bit of face. But they were told, sod off. Silence. Court in session. Now, I don't actually have audio from the trial, so I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but I do believe this is exactly how the court case began. Yo, funky dudes, how's it hanging? I'm the judge and I'm going to be presiding over this mother-flipping case today. Let's get our litigation on. I'm pretty sure he said something like that, but it's what he said at the end of the trial that's more important, and how he determined that this book wasn't anything like a textbook, and it was absolutely 100% a creationist piece of literature which had been edited to masquerade as something different. Oh, and these are his exact words. The definition for creation science in early drafts is identical to the definition of intelligent design. Cognates of the word creation, creationism, and creationist, which appeared approximately 150 times, were deliberately and systematically replaced with the phrase intelligent design. The changes occurred shortly after the Supreme Court held that creation science is religious and cannot be taught in public school science classes. The weight of the evidence clearly demonstrates, as noted, that the systemic change from creation to intelligent design occurred sometime in 1987 after the Supreme Court's important Edwards decision. So there we have it. Just like that, this book was now more worthless than it even was to start with. None of the members of the school board were re-elected, and the lawyers from the Thomas More Law Centre had to go on national TV and get the spanking they deserved.
Mr. Thompson, you really got an intellectual spanking from this judge, huh?
Well, I think the judge ruled in a particular way.
Yep, well done, Perry Mason. That's how it works. But how will he hold up now to being told that this was never about presenting an alternative scientific explanation for evolution? It was purely about inserting religion into the classroom.
You guys need to
places
admit it.
himself.
Why don't you just come clean?
No, wait,
just
this-
come clean. I mean, just
Well,
come clean and say, look, look, we feel that we can make an argument here, and that's what you made. You made an argument, and look, it sounds like you made a legal argument, and you called in experts, etc. But the bottom line is, this is about religion. Just say it. It's okay.
It's what?
It's about religion.
Yeah, go on. Just say it. Go on.
It is not about religion. It's about scientific theories, one scientific theory versus the other. And the court should not place itself in the position of determining the validity of a scientific theory.
No, surely it's best just to ignore all the scientific evidence in favour of evolution and just guess at what might have happened. Just as the defendants did in this case when they guessed that God created life by intelligent design.
This is the ruling again from the court. Intelligent Design's official position does not acknowledge that the designer is God. However, it is notable that defense witnesses admitted their personal view that the designer is God.
Isn't that an argument? Isn't that a fallacious argument? Just because a person personally believes that the designer is God, all at once disqualifies him from making a scientific conclusion. That is an argument ad hominem.
Now, after seeing this guy in action, I have no idea how they possibly could have lost that case. And the crazy thing is, he isn't even the least competent creationist I've ever met. Check out this comment that I received after I had a debate with world-famous creationist Kent Hovind, in which I told him that he simply didn't understand evolution. Absolutely beautiful. Anyway, if you've made it this far into the video, I want to say a big thank you very much. Maybe consider hitting that subscribe button or not. It's up to you. If you are one of my patrons, can I just tell you how much I absolutely love you? And if I knew where you lived, next time you were eating a bowl of Rice Krispies, I would come round to your house and I would feed them to you one at a time using chopsticks. I'm off now to take a dump in my neighbour's pillowcase. See you next week.